We're here recording live in Phoenix at the 2023 Informs annual meeting, and I have the pleasure of sitting down with Servi, who is one of this year's keynote speakers. His presentation, Operations Research and National Security, will provide an informative and, dare I say, fun first-hand look at OR and national security, and that he hopes will have attendees looking forward to learning more. So Les is the Chief Scientist for Cyber Operations at the MITRE Corporation and the immediate past president of the Military Operations Research Society, as well as an Informs Fellow. So thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So before we dive into our conversation, I do have a small housekeeping item, and that is that we understand the opinions expressed today do not represent any of the organizations you're affiliated with. So now that we have that out of the way, I'd love to have you share a little bit of your background, because I understand you initially did not have a national security or military background, correct?
Correct. It's a long process. I started when I was grad school. The really hot topic was telecommunication, particularly at Bell Laboratories. Bell Laboratories was sort of the epicenter of a lot of OR work. So I joined Bell Laboratories, spent a number of years there, evolved toward other places, and eventually ended up at Lincoln Laboratories, which was my entree into working in military work. In general, I think my interests in OR interest in careers have changed over time. At the beginning, I wanted to work on interesting problems. And then I wanted to work on financially impactful problems. And later on, I worried more about public policy or working on problems that might save lives or might have bigger motivations.
That's very interesting. I'd love to hear more about your role with the MITRE Corporation, and how does that kind of play into what you'll be discussing in your session?
Works on a diversity of many projects. My current role, I'm leading projects trying to frame new problems. Every now and then I'm speculating a little bit about the future. I also try to do some mentoring on the side. And not just national security, I've worked a lot in healthcare. I did some rural health work. I also did some work with how do you minimize the burden of health metrics report to the government. So
I understand you were also part of 2 Defense Science Board task force studies. Could you share a little bit about what these are and how you came to be involved with them?
It's an interesting story. First of all, a Defense Science Board is typically funded by an Undersecretary of Defense who reports to the Secretary of Defense, who reports to the President of the United States. So it's very, very high visible work.
Wow, yeah.
Many years ago, there was a study about operations research. And when that came out, not many people in the OR community and the non-military OR committee were reacting to it. And I was calling everyone I knew to say, the Department of Defense is interested in operations research. Why aren't we on top of this? One of the people I talked to was an Informs and More's member, Jack Keane, and he said, yes, I was involved in this. There might be a second OR study. Would you like to be involved in that? So I said, of course. And I thought I was going to be on that. But before that study was solidified and what its charter was, there was a sort of a famous general who wrote a paper saying, this is when we were involved with Afghanistan, wrote a paper that said that intelligence is too much about guns and should be about broader issues. What are the people thinking? So this OR Part 2 study turned into a study about coins, counterinsurgency, and I was involved with that. So that's where the first one started. The second study I was involved in, I was the editor of a book on behavioral sense making. This is related to some of the Twitter work that I contributed some of my Twitter work into this book, but I was also editor of this. The person who was in charge of another DSP study was in the hospital, and someone gave him this book, and he loved the book, and he noticed my contribution and sent a message saying, we want you.
Oh, that's terrific.
So that's where the second one started.
Oh, wow. So you're obviously a longtime member of Informs. I would love to hear how your relationship with Informs began.
It was a while ago. When I was in high school, I ran a chess club.
Okay.
And one day, the associate director of MIT's Operations Research Center walked in, Al Drake. He was a very, very early pioneer in operations research. He sort of told me a little bit about what OR was like. Later on, I took my first OR course with Stella DeFermis at Brown University, who really formally introduced me to her. But also, that was when I was an undergraduate, also a friend of mine was the daughter of one of, I think, the 5th Inform's president, Martin Ernst.
Okay.
Not really of Informs, but of the organization before
Yeah.
Informs. And he invited me to lunch a few times and gave me some advice about OR. So that's where it all began. So it began very, very early.
Currently, what are some of the biggest threats to national security, and how can OR help?
There's too many to mention.
Yeah, say where to begin.
I don't think I'm a professional in figuring out which are the hottest ones now, and they're changing as we speak.
Yeah.
But I'd say what's different and somewhat different and more important is it's not just about weapons. It's about information. It's about social media. It's about supply chains.
Interesting.
And these areas are play to a lot of OR talents, and cyber, of course. And I think that's the part that's going to grow more and more. It's growing, but it's going to grow. And of course, big data.
Looking ahead to your keynote, in the description, you mentioned references that range from Pearl Harbor to pirate attacks to the Manchester United Football Club to salami slicing and even Steve Jobs and Dr. Seuss. Could you share how each of these relate back to OR and national security?
Well, what I want to do is, rather than talk about, as a keynote, I want to set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about the nature of the type of work I do, and the way I work is different from the way other people work. But each of these is a small project that was my little attempt to put a little stone to say, this is a direction we should work.
Mm-hmm.
The pirate attack work was done before 9/11, so a long time ago. There was a 4-star general who came to the place I worked and said, I'm concerned that all these types of information are treated in a very decoupled way. They're all siloed, which of course was anticipated a little 9/11. I want you to do a study on anything that uses multiple forms of sensing and finish it in 90 days. And his goal wasn't to take that work and implement it. His goal was to take that work and use it as an example of what his organization should do with multiple types of information, as well as doing things a little faster. At that time, a Time magazine article had an article about a pirate attack off Somalia. And during that time, pirate attacks happened to be growing. At that time, I think it was every few days there was a pirate attack.
Oh, wow,
so
that
quite
frequently.
remarkable.
Okay.
So I had this idea. You take multiple sensors, you that are watching ships, and you infer their trajectory. And if you have multiple sensors, you can triangulate, so you can get a very good, accurate assessment. Once when you can track their trajectory, what OR people are very good at is doing abnormality detection. You want to detect whether there's a change in the pattern.
Okay.
And if the change is a good, and combine that with your knowledge about where there tend to be pirate attacks. There tend to be pirate attacks off Africa as well as the Strait of Somalia. With that, we basically built a pirate detector. And this was used as an illustrated example. We also worried about spoofing, that people can try to fake some of the signals. Well, if you have known sources, it's a simple OR problem to figure out how can you figure out which sources are correct and which ones aren't. So that was that. Manchester United. We were interested in social media.
Okay.
And at the time, people were very touchy about applying social media to anything that was sensitive.
Okay.
Because now, of course, anything close to me is in the public domain. So I wanted to work on social media to show something about detecting change in sentiment analysis without being sensitive. So we decided to look. At the time, the Red Sox were in the World Series. I'm from Boston. So I proposed to our management saying, I want to do something on sentiment analysis of the Red Sox.
Okay.
And they said, well, the Red Sox are an American team. Let's do something outside of the United States.
Oh, shucks.
So we did Manchester United Football Club, which is the largest sports franchise in the world.
Oh, really? Okay.
And we basically looked at all tweets related to Manchester United Football Club during one season and found where are the spots where the emotions change the most. And then we try to figure out, once we found those spots, we did some statistical analysis. What was special about those spots? And we try to do the usual thing of looking at wins and losses, and that didn't tell us anything. But then I found someone that knew a lot about Manchester United. I gave him these dates, and with these dates, he figured out what was special about those things.
Okay.
And the lesson is that OR found the dates, And this guy, when he had the dates, could have figured out what was happening. But I think either one of us working independently wouldn't have solved that problem. And of course, we've taken sentiment analysis and doing it for other things.
Oh, wow.
Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had a wonderful lecture about bicycles. What he said is that bicycles is a new type of OR. A bicycle is a new type of tool.
Okay.
And what he basically showed is that if you look at the efficiency of man in moving, and you look at energy expended per kilogram of weight, man doesn't do that well compared to other animals. But if you look at a man on a bicycle, beats all the animal kingdom. So what I was saying, and what he said as well, computers are we're tool builders. Computers are a tool that leverage mankind. So I thought, well, let's run with that idea. And when I was president of Moore's, I had to come up with a theme for the year. So I came up with the theme, analytics as a force multiplier.
Okay.
And the idea is analytics, or OR, is letting people do so much more than they could do by themselves.
Got it.
And if you're, and it also gives you the framework of thinking of building a tool that you're building to. So if you're a practitioner, your goal is to build a tool that has impact that will help other people do much more. If you're a sponsor, you should look at these tools as going after very, very big fish. And you should recognize the fact that not everything will work. You know, it took a long time to get satellites to work. It took a long time to get rockets to work. OR is the same thing. If you're going after big fish, if you're trying to build a sophisticated tool to do big things, it's not going to always succeed. But when it succeeds, it will have a disproportionate impact. There's sort of this heavy tail of impact of OR projects.
Okay. So I think we still have salami slicing and Dr. Seuss. This was a multi-layered question.
Dr. Seuss, I found two wonderful quotations, one of which I ended up taking out of the talk. But he had this quotation inspiring people. I don't remember the exact quote, but he was sort of inspiring people that if you're not there to do the problem, who will be there? And salami slicing, there's a lot of things in international politics that is salami slicing like. And I had this idea of building a little game theory model that will try to capture salami slicing. Okay. And I've been working, and I haven't brought in yet, but I'm trying to find a specific subject matter expert in a specific domain. And there's a number of candidates that I have to get the data to sort of wrap this up. But that was inspired by one of the Defense Science Board studies I was on. Wow. We were talking about salami slicing. And I thought, well, rather than just talk about it, let's try to build a mathematical model.
That's interesting. So you obviously are going to cover a lot in your talk tomorrow. What is the perhaps most important point you hope attendees to take away with them after your talk is over?
If they're not familiar with national security, check it out. Become an intern. If you're a faculty member, go on a sabbatical at a place. But challenge your assumptions. And also figure out how you should do ROI in a way that's made for you. Yeah. I clearly have my own style. And other people have their styles. And you shouldn't try to be like me. You should try to be like you. And you have to figure out what that is.
That's a great message.
And also, I tended to like working on early projects, trying to see what's going on. Some people like to work on later projects and make it, bring it in. And that's also legitimate. And I think it's important to figure out what stage in the life cycle of an OR project you want to be.
All right. So the question that I've been looking forward to the most, I heard a rumor that you have co-authored a poem about machine learning and OR with ChatGPT. What are the chances I could convince you to share that with our listeners today?
I would be glad to try. Let me tell you the reason I wrote this poem. Okay. One of the tasks of people at MITRE is to advise the government on things. And one day someone came to MITRE and said, I don't remember how much money, it was a lot of money, maybe $5 million. And I want to use it for machine learning to give to universities. Okay. And he spent a lot of time trying to figure out his problems. And he wanted advice on refining the problems and who he might talk to. Okay. One of the problems was a scheduling problem. And that's something, I don't want to sound like I'm not a big believer in machine learning and of course LLMs, but scheduling is what OR was made to be doing. And I said to him, you should have this is a great problem, but you should talk to OR people about it. And I actually pointed him to specific people. And he said, no, this money is earmarked toward machine learning.
Okay.
That's the reason for the poem. And I am an amateur at poems. And I also should point out that this is co-authored by ChatGPT 3.0.
Yep.
Navigating the Divide Between Machine Learning and Operations Research. That's the title. Machine learning, though advanced in might, is not the answer to every fight. Operations research, it's not a foe, but a valuable tool you should know. The problems that require explainable solutions cannot always be solved by deep learning evolution. OR has its place, a potential fit. With methods like linear programming, it's legit. It's sad to see ML being misused for problems that OR should be infused. The result is subpar, not what we aim. The true power of OR is not to blame. So let us choose our methods with care and ensure that the right tool is there. For each challenge, both have unique demands, and both machine learning and OR should be hand in hand.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun. Well, Les, thank you so much for joining me. This has really been, honestly, a fun and informative interview. Anything else you'd like to share about your presentation with our listeners?
Come with an open mind, take home a nugget. This talk is trying to do a lot of things for a lot of people. Find one piece of it that resonates with you.